Okay, we have now moved into chapter 5, which is on leadership. Your leadership, social movements and social solutions to climate change. Arihan from UCSB is well known in the field of social movements, theory of change, and so on. And the chapter also defines leadership, agency, and tries to distinguish between mobilization and organization. This is all social science. I'm not a social scientist, but I have loved reading it and trying to understand it enough to have this as a placeholder. Maybe someday real social scientists will replace this part of my course. But for now, I think I have understood enough to convey the main ideas. So if we go to our dear Greta Thunberg, who is now leading youth movements across the world and inspiring a lot of mobilization. Is she just mobilizing or organizing? It turns out that there are differences. In other words, are you reaching people who already believe this story of climate change and want to do something? And will they do something when they are mobilized like this? Will that actually lead to social solutions? Those are not easy questions. So the chapter argues that climate change is not only a scientific, technical, and economic problem, but also very much a problem of power. So people who are affected, if they cannot bring about change, then they don't have the power to do it. And problems of power require social solutions. Okay. Uh, Also, we have to understand what is leadership. How do leaders create social movements and make them effective in bringing about social transformation? Okay, this leads to something called theory of change. Of course, it includes problem of power and collective action. Here is an example of a schematic of theory of change model. This is from the Creative Commons attribution. The key parameters considered are broad type of program, philosophy of intervention. So social movements or theory of change is trying to intervene and bring about change. What is the philosophy of such an intervention? Level of prevention, target population, modality, and infrastructure. Okay, so you have to know the root causes, the factors that lead to or cause the need or the problem. You have to know the need, the specific needs, problems, or issues the intervention is going to be addressing. What are the resources? What are the activities or outputs? So you have to have metrics to track that change is happening and it's going in the right direction. Implementation of outcomes, so changes for practitioners, organizations, or systems arising from the activity. So if the transformation is to be sustainable, then you have to have a outcome that translates into codes for practitioners, organizations, and systems. Mechanisms of change, participants' responses and learning from the activities. So their understanding, their thinking, their feeling, and outcomes, the changes that should result for participants, behaviors, practices, relationships between communities, between citizens and states, between institutions, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's kind of a broad brushed definition, but within that comes this concept of wicked problems. I should have raised it before as well, but this is as good a place to do it as any. This is a concept that was defined by urban planners Horst Rittel and Melvin Weber. They were faculty at Berkeley in the 1960s, and they realized that the problem of creating space to be shared by various stakeholders did not have a clear definition of the problem itself. It did not really have a solution because everybody's view of the solution was different. So they call these as wicked problems, not in the moral sense, but in a sense of finding solutions. And they basically concluded that wicked problems don't have solutions, but you can resolve them, so they have resolutions by making agreements between different parties. And it means that resolutions are not permanent, so you have to resolve them again and again. Okay, so the best examples they gave was one about crime, education, healthcare, and so on. And you know that communities across the world at various scales struggle with these problems. In the US, for example, the idea of reforming police force right now, because of the various killings by the police, have raised this problem of law and order and crime again. Okay, so this is my own article that I wrote applying the idea of the wicked problem to climate. Other people have done this as well. So I list top 10 reasons why climate change is a wicked problem. You can Google and find this, or you can find it on my blog site. Um, the first one, there is no one definition of climate change. Climate change doesn't mean necessarily the same thing for everybody. It could be a positive thing or a negative thing. If you're in Siberia and it's getting less harsh during the winter, you may think that's a good thing. It gets warm enough and Siberia becomes good for agriculture in the summer. It may be a great thing for them, right? So climate change just means change with respect to some baseline or a time period, but doesn't necessarily mean good or bad. Or it could be heavy rainfall, sea level rise, spring arriving earlier, which would elongate the growing season, and so on. You cannot know when you have solved a problem under climate change umbrella. So there are, let's say, sea level rise. What did you do? Let's say you mitigated climate and you controlled sea level rise from 2 meters to 1 meter. I'm just giving an example. Does that mean you've solved the problem? Not really, because if land is sinking or if cyclones are increasing, you could still have storm surge and inundation and property damage, preventing people getting close to the coast for living and so on. Okay? Or ocean could still be getting warm and fisheries could still be suffering. Solutions to climate crisis are not true or false or good or bad. It depends. Right now the framework of this book is that we must bring the global warming to remain under 2 degrees centigrade. Does that guarantee that everybody will be safe? Hardly. Okay, because 2-degree global warming, as we said, comes with higher rates of warming somewhere, higher rates of sea level, extreme events, snow melt, glacier melt, and so on. So climate crisis doesn't necessarily have solutions that can be exactly true or false or good or bad. Mitigating climate change, of course, is good, but it could bring negative impacts on some people, which we will find out. Solutions to climate change generate unexpected consequences over time, making it difficult to measure their effectiveness. This is something we must understand. The changes we make in infrastructure, rules and regulations, cropping patterns, forests, everything is going to change. Just this week, there is a paper emphasizing that global warming basically is irreversible at this point because we have put so much carbon and we are on way to putting so much more carbon into the atmosphere that we are probably not going to come back to this pre-industrial climate again for a long time. Okay? Every solution we deploy will have irreversible consequences. That's fairly obvious. That's what we said. Ordinary problems come with limited set of potential solutions. Climate change doesn't. Even something like ozone hole had one silver bullet kind of solution, switching from CFCs to HFCs, but HFCs are now a big problem in terms of their global warming potential. We will see that. So you can create unintended consequences, and what seems like a silver bullet solution actually may not be actually a complete solution. Climate change has no precedent, so experience won't help you deal with it. In our lifetime, in the lifetime of modern human beings for the last 10 to 12,000 years, we haven't experienced anything like this in terms of the speed of warming, the impacts of warming, and the ubiquitousness of the warming. Despite the science advances, the technology advances, there are limitations to how much we can deal with. So there are experiences are not sufficient to plan for the long-term future if this continues. While ordinary problems are self-contained, climate change is mixed up with other problems and doesn't have one root cause. So human activity, everything we do affects climate: eating, traveling, the way we live our lives, energy intensity, and the wars, the military industrial complexes, everything affects climate change. And climate change affects food, water, energy, health, law, medicine, journalism, everything, engineering, and so on, right? Climate change involves many stakeholders, obvious, nearly all of whom have different ideas of the problem and its ideal solutions. Okay? Climate scientists may just say reduce the carbon and it'll be all fine, but that's not necessarily what everybody may think. We have to be sure. Plus, there will be winners and losers, so some people will benefit from climate change, as I said. Tropics may become uninhabitable, but higher latitudes may begin to have nice beaches for tourism and lots of money, right? So we don't know what are the different stakeholders thinking about what is a good solution. Problem solvers are liable for the consequences of any actions they take because the actions will have large impact. This is where we have to remember that the scientists, social scientists, natural scientists can insist, Greta Thunberg can insist climate action is needed, but who's going to make the decisions? And who's responsible for the decisions? Oftentimes, the people who provide input saying we must make decisions are not held responsible in terms of getting thrown out after an election, for example. So even though everybody seems to hate politicians, politicians have to make decisions and they may be held responsible for their decisions, good or bad, depending on who thinks it's good, who thinks it's bad. If you look at the US election, 70 million people voted for one person and 74 million people voted for another person. That's not a big difference. So there are perceptions of who's doing what and how it affects them. And this is what makes climate change a wicked problem. There are many more ways to say it, but this is just one way that I listed the top 10 reasons why it's a wicked problem.